So I'm pretty much late to the party once again, but I did at least manage to finish Tears of the Kingdom before 2024. I think it's a fantastic game. At least it's more or less what I expected from a direct sequel to Breath of the Wild, considering it does take place in the same Hyrule, with the same Link and Zelda, and all of the other characters we met in Breath of the Wild. As I also expected, there is of course a significant amount of people posting videos about why they did not like Tears of the Kingdom overall. Not trying to sound mean or anything, but it is rather easy for me to not bother watching videos from small channels and just agree to disagree. But when I saw a critical video coming from a prominent channel like GameXplain, my curiosity was piqued. Will their video be able to provide me with some meaningful insight I did not notice myself after playing the game? Unfortunately, no. Even if it was meant to be an off-the-cut, non-scripted rant discussion, it was a complete mess. As a matter of fact, being that GameXplain is a significantly large channel in the gaming community, I see the potential that their video could damage the reputation of Tears of the Kingdom where it is simply not deserved, which is one of the reasons I'm making this video. As some of you may already know, it only took the loud voice of one significant internet persona to instigate a large-scale internet trend about Skyward Sword being an absolute disgrace of the Zelda franchise. And despite there being a handful of counter-argument videos, and even a let's play from the person in question showcasing he had absolutely no idea what he was talking about, pretty much most people were still willing to blindly lick his boots. All of this fiasco happened because people were not willing to stop and think, letting their feelings completely wash over logic and reason. Should it come to that point, it is even more important to be willing to look back and re-evaluate our own words and actions. With that lengthy introduction out of the way, let's address some disclaimers before we get started. Unlike Egoraptor, GameXplain never explicitly stated and advertised that their video will be a fair and critical analysis. I completely understand if you are willing to dismiss their video and let them be entitled to their own opinions, but I'm not you, so... In any case, I want to respond to their critical video with a more objective approach, because I am rather disappointed there was hardly any valid objective arguments made in a video by GameXplain. I think you will gradually understand where I'm coming from the further you watch my response, so let's jump into it already.
Jake, we haven't been burned alive yet, but I'm afraid because people haven't heard the discussion we just recorded that they're about to listen to about our thoughts on Tears of the Kingdom. Are you concerned at all about this, Jake?
I am concerned. Every 20 minutes of this recording, you can look over while you're talking and see me go, are we making a big mistake? In my mind, thinking about it. Because we get in there. We talk about a lot of stuff in this game that, frankly, we don't like. And I just think the reason we're recording this now at the front is to say that the purpose of us being so negative is not to make anybody feel bad about enjoying Tears of the Kingdom. And we recognize things that are good about the game, but it's just, we're just talking about art, not trying to yuck anybody's yum, having an informed discussion now that we've had time to think about the game.
Exactly right. I mean, there's tons of positive discussions out there, and there are elements of that here as well. So if that is what you want, I strongly encourage you to close this video, go find another discussion. We've had our own on this channel.
I gotta be honest, an intro with the hosts basically disclaiming their contrarian approach to the discussion is never a good sign for me anymore. And like I said, I think you will understand why later on.
But Jake and I, we wanted to approach this game for a different angle and try to explain why we felt like, in the end, even though there were many parts of the game that impressed and surprised us, why we were underwhelmed in the end. So that's where we're going to leave it off here, so get ready for our discussion that we just finished recording, and we hope you enjoy it, but if not, let us know in the comments.
Oh god, okay, bye!
So we have some complaints about Tears of the Kingdom. Isn't that right, Jake?
Oh yeah, that's right. Been stewing on these complaints, marinating, and now I feel like we're ready. Take me out of the oven, let everybody sniff up these sweet complaints.
Yes, as if people were waiting just to inhale them immediately. But we did have to wait. This is already off to a weird start. We had to wait, though, I feel like, until the time was right, Jake. I don't know if now's the time, but we would have been roasted alive had we done this in the first few weeks, right? So I think enough time has passed. I think the door is now opened to some discussion about the fact that maybe Tears of the Kingdom isn't perfect or as great as everyone seems to think. Not that, hey, everyone's welcome to their own thoughts. I'm not going to try and convince you otherwise or anyone otherwise. And I think, honestly, it's a very fun time still. I spent over 100 hours with the game. I know Jakey spent close to that as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's something about that kept us coming back for that duration. Even if something may have happened at some point that changed that, perhaps beating the game, where we're like, maybe we've seen enough. Anyways, before we get into our specific complaints, Jake, and I think we'll probably time code it too. People want to skip ahead to that.
Yeah.
I just want top level discussion. How are you feeling? How did Tears of the Kingdom make you feel? A game we had waited 6 years for, over 4 years from its announcement, I believe. So a long time. Did it deliver? Like, is it what you wanted? Is it what you expected? I mean, for the longest time, we didn't even know what to expect from this game until, like, literally months before. So, just overall thoughts, Jake.
Yeah, overall, this is one of those things where we're going to get into all the complaints, and I will understand anybody that says, Jake, I did not feel that way. I understand that position 100%. But for me, I look at Tears of the Kingdom and I say, this is an incredibly well-built video game. I think it's like awesome to look at. I think it has some top level, like really cool ideas. But for me, it's not, the magic is gone. It never reached out and made an emotional or sentimental impact on me the way that Breath of the Wild did.
I mean, what could possibly go wrong with comparing Tears of the Kingdom to Breath of the Wild like that, considering the game takes place in the same Hyrule and with the same Link and Zelda? Trust me on this, ladies and gentlemen, Jake just goes on a full-on ramble about how Tears of the Kingdom did not have the magic Breath of the Wild has. For some reason, he's trying to avoid the fact that the game's story is a direct continuation from Breath of the Wild. Like I said, it's the same Hyrule with the same Link and Zelda, and also for some freaking reason, both Andre and Jake said they did not know what they could expect from Tears of the Kingdom, when just about anybody else could expect, and it bears repeating, a direct sequel from Breath of the Wild. I mean, a lot of people were outright calling it Breath of the Wild 2 shortly after it was announced.
And I think so much of Tears of the Kingdom for me was saying, okay, we're taking Breath of the Wild, one of my favorite games of all time. And the big question for me going into Tears of the Kingdom was, what are we focusing on? What are we changing? What is the remix? How are we changing coming home to this Hyrule? And I spent the entire game searching for meaning. And I never quite found it. There's so much there. It's really, really wide, but at the end of the day, I felt like it was like a painting. It was like beautiful to look at, but that, yeah, but that was it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that sounds, I like the way you put that. That sounds deep. I think my issue is overall similar. I don't know if I would have positioned it exactly that way, though I think it ultimately basically is. So we'll talk about that more. But again, moment to moment, I actually do think I had more fun with this. You know, like be able to create things, craft things from the environment, which is a mechanic in a game that, or in a, is a game of mechanic I don't usually like. I don't like crafting, but this game made it feel organic enough. I'm like, this is cool. I'm gonna just plug this into that and it does something. Hey, that's neat. But I think to your point, it doesn't amount to anything. It didn't feel cohesive to me. Like it feels like they just took a huge box of crap, dumped it into the world. It's like, hey, go figure it out yourself. Go have fun. And I think my big issue, which we'll probably circle back to at some point, is that it doesn't know whether it's a game or a sandbox. Breath of the Wild is so much clearer to me. It's like, I felt like that game knew what it was. Tears of the Kingdom doesn't know what it is. And like, I'm seeing, and whether to its credit or detriment, I'm seeing amazing things from creators on TikTok and Twitter of the insane things they're making. It's impressive. I'm like, that is so cool. I never once had that drive. I never felt compelled to spend hours to make this device that I could accomplish, just by running there and doing something by whacking my sword at it, So I think that's where, I think my issue is that it never feels cohesive, and so even if I had more fun moment to moment, it lacks the peaks and valleys that Breath of the Wild did, where I don't have the huge, like, holy crap, or, the sense of accomplishment from doing something, because the moments that do exist here, which, largely mirror that Breath of the Wild and aren't even fresh in and of themselves, so that's kind of where I'm at. The game isn't cohesive to me.
Andre stated that he is generally not into crafting mechanics, and even though he acknowledged that crafting in Tears of the Kingdom does indeed have a lot of creative potential, I seriously don't understand why he spent more than 1 minute trying to justify his general opinion about crafting mechanics, and that somehow Tears of the Kingdom is losing points for not being able to get him hooked with its own implementation of the mechanic. Even if Andre came with some concrete examples of the game providing him with the necessary materials to solve a problem, it is simply doomed to fail impressing him. I don't understand why he couldn't just say, I don't like crafting in general, and Tears of the Kingdom is no different. Moving on.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think when we get into our more specific examples here, it will maybe clarify any confusion out there, because when we talk about a game being cohesive and not having like those peaks and valleys and it just kind of being a, here's a sandbox, make your own fun, rather than maybe implementing limitations and trying to create a system that funnels us towards a specific experience with a specific catharsis, I think what we're really seeing there is a mismatch. It's a lot of things, but I think for me what it is there's a huge mismatch between narrative and game structure. And these two things, they exist in the same video game, but have nearly nothing to do with each other and barely ever speak. And like I think some people that like can make that separation or make those things come together in their own heads, but in my experience, it did not. So I think we should just start going through one by one. I've got a list of hot takes.
Are we ready for this? I feel like, Jake, I'm afraid. I don't know if we've buttered up the audience enough to allow this without us getting roasted live. I'm like, do we need to say a few more good things about the game? Like, should we? I'm gonna get roasted.
It's okay. I said I didn't.
You're buttered up to get roasted.
Yeah, I'm buttered up. I just said I didn't like PD Piranha, and that was it for me with the comments.
I don't think these guys are taking this seriously at all. In which case, I should probably not be making this kind of serious response, yet here we are.
So I'm ready. I'm ready to jump in. And can I submit my first hot take?
Go for it, Jake, please.
Okay. The depths. This huge, huge map underneath the map of Hyrule. Yep. So many people are gonna, I've heard this complaint since the game was revealed. It's using the same map as Breath of the Wild. How can that be interesting? Well, it can be interesting because we have this whole second map underneath Hyrule. Sounds great. In practice, I'm gonna be using this word a lot. I found it to be meaningless. It is the coolest part of the depths is the first time you discover it.
Yep. I was gonna say exactly the same.
Never gets any cooler than that.
Just like how Tears of the Kingdom can never feel as special because you experienced this version of Hyrule first in Breath of the Wild. Here we go, I guess.
The first time you throw one of those little seeds and you're like, surely it's gonna hit a wall. No. Surely it's gonna hit a wall, and then it just doesn't. Like, that experience is awesome, and the emotional peak starts and ends there. The fact that like it's one biome and it looks the same the entire time. Once you've spent 10 minutes in the depths, you've spent 3 hours there. The fact that it's Destiny 2 level, hey, it's the enemies you've seen the entire time you've been playing this game, but now they have a little bit of paint on them. Like, so unbelievably boring, the definition of bland, and I kind of feel like it would have been, with restraint, it could have been so much better. These areas are presented where you dive into the depths on the map blatantly. You come across them without any aplomb. It's kind of just like, they're just like there, like, yeah, come in because you're supposed to come in. And all of the big seeds that illuminate the area, they're perfectly spaced apart so that you can go from one to the next to the next. It's all such a video game. It's all just there to provide you with more. And if you're somebody that says, well, Tears of the Kingdom is better than Breath of the Wild because it contains Breath of the Wild plus more,
right,
then hey, I guess how am I supposed to argue with that? But the lack of focus, the lack of intention, they never use the depths to make a moment more interesting or scary or meaningful. And instead, it's just this huge blanket underneath the entire world. Could you imagine if there was just like 3 spots in the whole game where you could enter the depths and you'd played for 30 hours and then all of a sudden you walk over somewhere and you go, maybe there's an NPC and they're looking at it and they're like, what the heck is this? And then, you know what I mean? Like, it would have meant something. But the fact that it's just like, oh, we've got to dot the map with these the same way we dot the map with towers, the same way we dot the map with the shrines, the same way we dot the map with whatever the heck, with the guy with his sign. It's just like, it's just another thing. And what you're actually doing in the depths is virtually identical to what you're doing everywhere else in the game.
So let me remind you that Jake proclaimed he had a suggestion for how the depths could be a more meaningful experience, but the suggestion he ultimately comes up with here is about entering the depths, not the actual exploration of the vast area. And did he seriously complain about having to discover and map out uncharted territory? Does it really not mean anything to Jake that Link is basically getting the honor of mapping out a newly discovered world? No, it is a puzzled NPC looking at a big hole in the ground that gets him all excited. I just don't understand.
Yeah, no, Jake, you're 100% right, I think. The best moment is when you go into the depths, you're like, what the hell is this place? Like, you have the amazing, that cool horn sound, the place is gigantic, you know, but you can only accomplish that impressiveness once, right? From that point onward, is just you stumbling around in the dark, throwing seeds around, which I guess exist only to justify the caves above ground, to give you a reason to go explore those. And it really hit me, Jake, when... I mean, again, like, to the game's credit, there's something just inherently fun about controlling Link that somehow took me hours to realize, why am I wasting my life down here? There is no reason to. I made a tweet about this. This is when it hit me. Like, this is just a big closet. I'm just running around finding Link's ancient outfits, which I don't even care about, honestly. I don't even wear them. I just wear what I need to in any given situation, which usually isn't those outfits. And beyond that, the only other things of note are the Yiga clan areas where you can get blueprints, which are for vehicles that are useless, from what I can tell. I never use them. Yeah, no. Useless.
Andre, I can't take your criticism about something being useless simply because you don't use it. I mean, we already know that you're the type who doesn't really want to bother with crafting and being creative, so why are you still going on about this?
Like, it's a cool idea. I never used them. And yeah, it just started to aggravate me, Jake, especially because, too, they have those little, like, you know, and this is also my time, another big complaint I'll get to later on, but they have those, like, little shrine areas, or the not shrines, actually, the little build areas where you can build contraptions to help you explore. But I always just end up building the same thing over and over because they give you the parts for it.
Well, that's right? But that's exactly what the game wants you to do. It says here is a jigsaw puzzle. There are 6 pieces. Put them together. And and the entire game suffers from this. It's in literature, it's what I would call the author's thumb, when you see a choice happening simply because the creator wants it to happen. And it's like, it's exactly what you said. It's like, oh, that's why the seeds are here for this area. There's this little thing, why are the Yiga down there? Because we decided. And it's all just like video game stuff. And there's not, it's again, it's that search for meaning, where it's like, when are you supposed to, exploring the depths, have a feeling that, like, perks you up? I have no idea.
We are just 13 minutes into their nearly 2-hour-long rant, and my head is already starting to hurt from their inability to pay attention to the game's story. Kind of like another gaming persona. One of the very first side quests the game encourages you to do is to enter the depths because... there are traces of an unknown ancient civilization down there, and Joshua is literally asking Link to dig up information for her. If that still doesn't feel anything special to you guys, then fine, but to say that there's absolutely no purpose to go down there is simply a falsehood, considering there are indeed useful items and materials to be found down there. Puff shrooms and muddle buds are literally some of the most powerful items you can use against enemies. And there's practically no better place to farm bomb flowers, considering you can also collect postals, which can be traded for even more bomb flowers and other neat things. It's also only in the depths where you can find weapons which are not decayed. Why they are not decayed here, I have no idea. Maybe I'm just missing some lore element or something. And as far as lore and world building goes, anyone can make the argument that the depths still creates a sense of wonder in this regard. My problem with Andre and Jake is that they want to deduct points from Tears of the Kingdom simply because they didn't feel any purpose for being down there. They are trying to tell everyone that there is basically nothing in the depths, which is simply not true, and again, they don't really come up with concrete suggestions for how it could be done better.
And yeah, I think, Jake, to speak to more to the issue with the depths, you know, beyond it just being an inversion of the world above, which I guess is kind of cool if you don't you know.
Don't give it. No, I'm not willing to give it that.
I don't. I mean, yeah, I don't know how I feel about that, to be honest. But my main issue with the depths, Jake, beyond what we touched on, where where it's meaningless, is it doesn't tie in anything. Like I think it could have been, what I think might have helped is if there were actually a proper reason to go explore. Where I guess the main reason I mentioned, the main reason beyond, actually I guess the main reason beyond the clothing is so you can find the Zonite, so you can build your battery power. But the problem is, this speaks to a larger issue, the gameplay loop of the game is broken. You don't really need bigger batteries. You rarely need much more battery power, which lessens the incentive to find Zonite, which lessens the incentive to go into the depths in the first place. And so my issue is that the gameplay loops, they don't work that well, and I wish there had been more incentive to go into the depths. For example, they kind of flirted with this element with one of the towers, where you have to go underground. Oh, I guess you only go into the depths, though. You go underground and you ascend into it. Had all the towers been underground initially to, like, force them upward, you know, by ascending into them, that might have been cool. Or that could have been the case for the shrines, maybe. Maybe you have to find the light seeds first underground to make the shrine pop up above. It would give more meaning to what you're doing. And I know for some, like, oh, that's just extra steps to accomplish the same things. But no, but, like, they're interconnected then. Like, it makes sense. You know, they already have these systems just poorly done, just connected all in a way that makes more sense in the gameplay. From a gameplay perspective.
I mean, 100%, because as it is right now, 90% of what you're doing in the depths is you're going from one little light thing to the next light thing, just to uncover the depths.
Which, why? Why? And actually, Jake, I was maybe 60% done with those light seed things. And I'm like, you know, whatever they're called, the shrine things underground. Yeah. And I'm like, why am I doing this? Yeah. I'm about to beat the game. Why am I still looking for these things? I don't need them. Yes, I realize that they correspond to where the shrines are above, so if you have trouble finding a shrine, you can do it this way, though this seems to be a more boring way of looking for shrines.
You guys literally complained about there being a weak connection between the shrines and the light routes, but even after admitting that there is indeed a proper connection between the two, and that it is an alternative way to discover either one, it is still somehow not a good thing. Makes perfect sense to me. What's your problem?
And so I gave up. I'm like, I'm done. I'm out. I'm wasting my life away finding these light seeds, which isn't accomplishing anything. But for some reason, in the moment, I think I'm kind of enjoying it. But I'm like, am I? You know, it's so strange.
It is a callback to an older kind of open world game where you are literally just like checking boxes in your mind. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna, because it is on a certain level fun to just control Link. I get that. And I think that's pretty much all it has going for it. And I do think it would have been more impactful if you couldn't have discovered that late game area on your own. And it was something that was like, I could not stop thinking about this. Remember the hand enemy? The hands?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Could you?
Who could forget?
Why can't the hands drag you to the depths?
Oh my god, that actually is a great idea. And then you have to, like, get out from the depths, you know?
Yes.
Yeah,
like, could you imagine if your first experience in the depths was an enemy took you there?
Oh man, that's like, cool.
There's stuff you could do. It's not capitalized on. Yeah.
What Jake is suggesting right here would mean the story or world building will need to make a rather drastic change, because at the end of the day, where do you fight Ganondorf? In the depths. Does it sound logical to you that the only way to reach the final boss is to be dragged down by an enemy which you would probably try to actively avoid or kill? Of course not, which would mean the game would eventually need to inform you about this method, either by a forceful cutscene or by something you learn about by doing the main quests. Jake doesn't further touch upon these changes the game will need to make, he just vaguely rambles on about how he wanted the depths to feel more mysterious to him. Once again, by how to enter the damn area. And only that. What so many critics fail to understand is that they need to think about how such changes may affect the rest of the game. It's fine to just throw around ideas, but if you want me to take you seriously, you gotta back that shit up. You know?
Kind of getting back to my point of this game lacking cohesiveness.
Yeah.
Like, I felt like one of the themes of Breath of the Wild was survival. And I don't feel that here, you know? No. Like, you can easily teleport your way out of danger, which you could before as well, but it feels even more pronounced in this game.
Dude, you just admitted you could easily warp away from danger in Breath of the Wild 2. You can't backpillar your way out of this one now. I'm definitely feeling a lack of cohesiveness here, but it's not from either of the games.
And yeah, I mean, I think having elements like that where maybe you can't warp out of the depths. Maybe you have to find some way out, you know, and you have to survive after being grabbed by the hands. Like, that's a cool idea. Like, that's a thematic tie-in, and I love it. And that's, yeah, I feel like the blueprint was here. They just didn't tie it all together well enough. And, you know, maybe the depths are too big, Jake. Like, I think it might have been more interesting. Yeah. Had each depth location been its own little region, not interconnected to the rest, I think that actually could have been cooler. There actually is a handful of those. Maybe I came across at least one of them. And I don't know if there's anything worth their finding. But I'm like, this is actually kind of cool. I like the idea of this being a little bit more contained. You don't need the whole map mirrored again.
Are you ready for your first?
I am, and it kind of ties in. I already brought up a little bit here, and actually, we discussed this before recording. Like, a lot of our points are like interconnected in a way. Like, you start pulling on one thread, the whole thing unravels. But Jake, beyond the depth, you know, the other big addition was the sky. And the sky is also meaningless. Yeah, the sky is also largely meaningless. Like, it is completely dead and vacant of life. And then a lot of the content is effectively copy and pasted. You come across that same freaking quadrant island with a little thing that shoots you, and it has a shrine there and the gumball machine. And you know, once I realized that too, I'm like, why am I seeking out all these islands? Like, it's not doing anything for me. The main incentive really is to, it's so weird, like, one of the main reasons to go back up there is just to buy Zonai parts, you know,
that's like the only reason to go back up there.
Yeah, right. And then that ties into other issues I have. I'll get to that later.
Yeah.
But the sky, like, it seems cool, and you know, I had some fun exploring it. I can't deny that. But like, once it sets in again, that like, I'm just doing the same crap that I've done everywhere else, just now in the sky. That there's no one here, there's no NPCs, there's no real story going on. I'm just seeking out things I can also find elsewhere, by and large, minus the Zonai pieces, and I don't know why I'm doing it. You know, like, I would just build, you know, aircraft to fly me to the next one, and that was it. And I by and large, I would end up using the sky as just a vehicle to get elsewhere on the ground. I would use a sky tower, use it a hop from jump rope or whatever, hop from different islands. I don't know what I'm trying to say, Jake. You know, skip to different islands and skydive from there to somewhere else on the ground. And which is weird, because then that also has the side effect of removing the whole, I don't know, feat of getting to where I wanted to originally, but I'm like making it trivial. Like, Breath of the Wild, I felt accomplished when I reached like a high point or something, but here I'm like, I'll just fly there, you know. So yeah, it's hard to separate my issues with that from the depths and the rest of the game, but it does feel like the sky just exists for me to go underground, find Zonai, go up into the air, mine it for battery power, which I can then use to juice the devices that I get from the gumball machines, which are randomly rewarded, and it's all just so weird. It's such a weird gameplay loop, Jake.
Oh, 100%. Because the gameplay loop is dependent on you wanting to cut down the time it takes you to go from point A to point B.
I seriously wish they would stop bringing Breath of the Wild up like this, because the way they go about it is awfully similar to when Egoraptor talked about Link to the Past and Ocarina of Time. Egoraptor was complaining about Ocarina of Time not having certain things Link to the Past had, even when it actually did. Like, how much do you want to bet that these people would say, man, I really wish there was a faster way to get around because I have been to this world already in Breath of the Wild, if Tears of the Kingdom didn't allow you to fly to almost anywhere? What exactly does Andre want here? Does it want the Sky Islands to be completely gone? What they somehow fail to acknowledge is that being able to fly to almost wherever you want is the reward for going out of your way to activate the Sky Towers. Even when you are up in the sky, you will find that some of the islands cannot be reached by regular means, or if you don't have enough stamina. The sky is one of the places which encourages players to make use of the Zonai devices in order to discover new islands, which is one of the things these two complain about, a lack of purpose to use Zonai devices. And aside from at least 3 areas in the sky, it is completely optional. Like, what do you expect from an open world game? And why don't they talk about the shrines located in the sky? You know, the places which Link needs to go to if he wants to get stronger. Is becoming stronger just pointless?
And my note, by the way, that I wrote down before this for the Sky Islands was, here's what I said. There is nothing fun about the Sky Islands. You use 2 kinds of vehicles and get everything done. Stuff kind of looks cool off in the distance, and then it's nothing. You see a crazy stacked tower of Sky Islands, and you go, what is this? Turns out it's designed for you to jump off the top for a stupid jump through the rings minigame so that you can get a dumb reward that is ultimately meaningless.
I mean, you only get an armor piece which grants you more mobility while skydiving, and if you upgrade the whole set by 2 levels, you become immune to fall damage. Yep, completely, objectively useless. I know Jake didn't claim the armor is objectively useless, but the fact that he doesn't even mention what the armor is really suspect to me. Like, why did he need to write down notes about the glide armor if he wasn't even gonna bother mentioning it by name?
And that's like, there's like 3 different things you do on the Sky Islands. None of them are fun. The tease of the Zonai machine the constructs, that goes nowhere and is meaningless. Yeah. And those are just video game elements to help you do video game things. Okay, fine. And getting the Zonite and making the vehicles and going from point A to point B, Zelda Breath of the Wild was awesome because it was a quiet little journey that knew you were like crossing this entire like country, going from place to place, arriving, showing up in a town, and everybody was like, "You're here." Yeah. And this game is like exactly what you said. It encourages you to fly up to a Sky Island, get in a plane, skip all of that stuff, and get to the thing you want to get to next. And it's just not meaningful or impactful in any way for me. Yeah.
Jake, I'm almost certain no open world game encourages the player to skip potentially optional areas just because the option is there. In fact, in Breath of the Wild, you could theoretically just head straight for Hyrule Castle and defeat the final boss, provided you had enough weapons for it. Could you please tell me where this stinky bias of yours is coming from?
By the time, Jake, and maybe I'm getting off track here already from this complaint, but maybe this ties into it too. By the time I was ready to finish the game, I was already over the game. And I think that's part of the issue too. Like, I didn't really care anymore. I just wanted to get it over with.
Oh, and, if I didn't work here, I would not have finished this game.
Excuse me, what?
I was coming up on the last of the main 4 dungeons, and it was like pulling teeth. I just did not want to do it.
Wow. All right. Well, let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Yeah. That sounds like it could be its own complaint. So let's, I think you're up next for a complaint, right?
Yeah. Okay, here's what I've got for you. The introductory sequence, talking with Zelda, that like they think they're the Last of Us for 10 seconds. Okay. Right. It's like, you go through one of those little, things. Promises something in the video game medium. That to me is making a promise for the kind of video game you are going to get, and they never even consider following up or delivering on that promise. It is the weirdest choice to make for the beginning of this game, to be like, hey, you know what's different from Breath of the Wild? We care more about the story. Look at this cinematic touch. Look at how we're purposefully slowing you down to give you information because it matters. And then I never hear about that information again. And the information I do hear about, I get repeated in my face over and over and over again. And it is symbolically, metaphorically meaningless. And all it boils down to is there's a bad guy. He's coming. We gotta stop him. See you at the end.
I could just stop my response here, because these guys might be even worse than Egoraptor when it comes to paying attention to a story in order to properly analyze it. What do you mean you never hear about the information ever again? You are literally fed more context by doing both the main missions and finding the optional memories. And not even 10 seconds later, you admit you actually do get information fed to you over and over and over again. Do you just have selective memory or something? Do you hear only what you want to hear? So, is Zelda good for capitalizing on simple elements, or is it now bad that it's another simple story about good versus evil? Again, I don't understand what he wants.
So, what is your specific complaint?
My specific complaint is that they have this moment at the beginning of the game, and it sets up a tone and a vibe and a...
It doesn't deliver on...
And it doesn't, not only does it not deliver, it is so incongruous to the rest of the game that I can't believe it's in here. What is this guided walking section at the beginning of the game where I'm getting a lore dump that ultimately doesn't matter? I find it to be an uninspired creative choice that, at worst, it like saw 5 seconds of The Last of Us and was like, oh, let's do that, without like understanding that's why the story was being told. And 2, then they have the nerve to be like, we're telling a story this way, and then you get out into the world and you realize the memories are back, and they're telling the story out of order, whole other complaint. And it I feel okay. So overall, my actual complaint.
There's a lot going on here.
Yeah, now that I've settled on it, I think my overall complaint is that this video game does not understand storytelling in a fundamental way. It does not understand why you would tell a story out of order. It doesn't understand how to meaningfully tell a story in order. And I think the storytelling decisions it makes are constantly undercut by the nature of its open world and the game. So maybe, I don't know. You can take this in any direction you want.
There is indeed some truth to the flaw of the nature of open world games, causing the player to experience imported story elements out of order, but it's not like Tears of the Kingdom was completely inconsiderate towards this possible flaw. If I'm not completely mistaken, early on in the game, you will eventually be told where to find Impa, and by assisting her, you will be led to the very first memory. Impa will then tell you to meet her in the Forsaken Temple, where you will find useful information about all of the other memory locations. And if you're able to put 2 and 2 together, you will understand which geoglyph to find next, if you care about the proper order of the memories. In my experience at least, there can actually be an advantage to experiencing the story out of order. I actually found the Master Sword before clearing either of the 4 main areas. I also found it before any of the Dragon Tiers, which of course means I discovered the Light Dragon well before the memories, before seeing that Zelda ended up in the ancient past. For the longest time, I thought the Light Dragon was simply a new dragon added into the world, just for the sake of holding onto the Master Sword, which was passed onto it by Zelda. Try to imagine my shock when I eventually pieced together that the Light Dragon was actually Zelda this entire time. I also had this portrait made of her long before I knew, and here I didn't want to make it too obvious that Link had a thing for Zelda, but it was her all along. So close, yet so far.
Yeah, I think Jake, I can distill this down to one of my notes here. The story is bad. The story is bad in this game. Okay.
Yeah.
So so that opening of the game, I liked it. I thought it was cool at the time. In the moment, I'm like, this is neat. Link didn't just wake up. This is like the first time ever we've seen that, or one of the few times where Link doesn't just wake up. So that was cool, felt different, I liked it. Yeah, it never follows up on that. It never delivers on that promise of what could be. In fact, it feels like the game forgets, I had this complaint with Breath of the Wild too. It feels even more pronounced here by and large, where the game, there's no narrative drive. It doesn't, nothing's compelling me to push me through this adventure. I guess in spirit, Ganondorf is supposedly constantly powering up, but that only happens when you finally approach him at the end, where he goes from the weakling, and he's all of a sudden is Super Saiyan or whatever it is.
No, it is Super Saiyan. That is the correct term. That is,
and it's just so underwhelming. It's like, you could have just done this all this time, bro. Why do you wait until the moment I show up to finally become a seeming threat? Even though he wasn't all that threatening, to be honest. I heard a lot of people having issues with him. I'm like, dude, the guy's a pushover.
Oh, yeah, me too. I heard that as well. People being like, this is like an Elden Ring boss. I was like, are you a baby?
Ideally, a boss being almighty in the lore should make a very difficult fight. But Jake, why were you throwing shade for no good reason at people comparing Ganondorf to an Elden Ring boss? It could very well be that they meant Ganondorf's appearance aesthetically reminded them of an Elden Ring boss. Even in the world of Elden Ring, people can argue that bosses are incredibly strong in the lore, but still not that difficult to fight. One example I can think of is the General Radahn, even though lore elements clearly state that you are fighting him in a weakened state.
Are you?
So yeah, and then there's a lot of ways we can distill this. The fact that they have the 4 quadrant areas again. You need to go to the 4 regions, the 4 what did they call it? The 4 phenomena, I believe you had to deal with or whatever.
Yes.
The key story point there is the same. It repeats it. They see Zelda do something. They're like, that looks a little sus. It's a Mario Sunshine story. Like, is that Mario sabotaging our town? And we experience the same thing 4 times. By the end, we know, we obviously know what's going on.
Andre does actually make a fair point here, because Link is able to learn that there is indeed a fake Zelda perhaps roaming about in the world, before you tackle either of the main 4 areas. But by the time you discover these fake Zeldas, Link never suggests to anyone that the Zelda they are seeing might be a fake. Not until the game allows you to. The curse of being a silent protagonist, I guess.
After the whole point, the fact that you're seeing the story that happened in the past, for me, isn't interesting. I inherently almost hate flashbacks. I blame Lost for this. I got so tired of Lost flashbacks. It's like, I don't really care. Like, we're living in the result. I don't much care how it got to that point. There's more interesting ways of explaining this, and I still think it would have been better if those sequences were playable. Maybe you could play as Zelda during those.
But even though you would be able to control Zelda in those flashbacks, they are still flashbacks, not the present. And people can definitely argue that being able to control someone in a flashback only drags out the memory for much longer than necessary. I would at the very least like to hear from Andre what he would have Zelda do in these memories if we were able to control her. No such luck, I'm afraid.
And then, of course, the imprisoning war, Jake. It's the lamest thing ever. We've been hearing about the imprisoning war for decades, and it's like 5 dudes standing around, or 5 people standing around against Ganondorf. Like, this is the lamest portrayal of this so-called war I could ever imagine. And I just didn't care. I didn't care about the story. There were no stakes once again. No one in the world cares what's going on, like Breath of the Wild. I'm like, why do I care? Why do I care what's going on?
It's a lazy, uninteresting contrivance. It is we're in the past and we are fighting him. It's 10,000 years ago because that's the number we decided on. It is, we are not strong enough to beat him now because we've decided that is our power level. You in the future are in fact strong enough to beat him now because your power, congratulations, you have Dragon Ball Z'd yourself and you are the strong enough level. Everything that happens in the story is contrived. You go to that ending boss battle and it's like, oh, your little guardian buddies, they cannot come with you. You for some reason are in a really big hurry to go fight Ganon. And then like at the moment where it would be most convenient, you know, the little bird goes, "We're here!" And I'm like, yeah, thanks. Like, I could have just waited 5 minutes, I guess, but I don't know.
At the end of the day, Zelda is a Nintendo game. Or at the very least, it's not Fire Emblem. Showcasing an all-out war with a full-on cutscene would honestly be unexpected to me. But it's not like Zelda is completely incapable of creating such fight scenes. Just look to Twilight Princess when Zant invades Hyrule Castle. The issues I am taking from this is that Andre and Jake are completely dismissing the ancient stone images of the imprisoning war. Like, it's fine if that's not enough for them, but the way they present this argument is that Tears of the Kingdom never presented the scale of the war in any way at all, when it actually did. Also, did he seriously complain about the sages catching up to Link to help him, suggesting that he could have just waited for them to catch up? Like, how could anyone be 100% certain about that when playing the game for the first time? Is he saying he would much rather have some timer suddenly pop up in the corner telling him, "Hey, you're probably screwed if you enter this fight now. You should wait 5 minutes for the sage to catch up to you." Come on, I don't want to be proven wrong when I said I believe there can be no worse Zelda analysis than Zelda Sequelitis.
Nothing is impactful. The game would be more interesting if it entirely took place 10,000 years ago, I feel. Anytime you walk up to somebody in this world, I find, so this is like such a hard thing for me to put my finger on, but the act of walking up to a character in Breath of the Wild and talking to them and seeing what they have to say, I found to be more interesting than that exact same exercise in this game. Where in this game, it was like, what do you remember from the last game? What are you trying to say right now? What is our relationship? And it just felt like we were picking something at random to suit whatever point we wanted to get across. And it just, the things that mattered, the things that didn't, it just felt meaningless again. And I even from the very beginning, Link gets that new arm. This kind of scary thing all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Like Link like lost his arm. He's got this weirdo creature arm now. And he's just kind of like,
all right, I guess that's me now.
thank you for my video game powers. And then he moves forward. And like, sometimes other characters bring it up, but it's not ever like as big of a deal as it should be. And especially since I think people are going to fight me in the comments and they're going to be like, no, Jake, one of the deeper themes of this game is giving up sacrificing your physical body to embody a sacred power. That, first off, is not a theme. Go back to school. That is not, just because it's a thing that happens. It's not, it's gotta have a proclamation. There's no proclamation there. Oh my God, it's for something that repeats in the story, something that I would call a motif. I feel that it is, again, meaningless. It happens again and again just to be like, oh yeah, because Zelda and Ganondorf and Link are connected, and they're good and evil, and they're balanced, and they're the same but different. But it doesn't. Yeah, it's just nothing. And I'm sure you're gonna go here.
Once again, Jake feels like the experience in Tears of the Kingdom is ruined because he played Breath of the Wild first. Well, sure, buddy, but could you at the very least simply and concretely suggest what Tears of the Kingdom could have done better for you? If you couldn't tell, I'm so sick and tired of people complaining for the sake of complaining. These guys clearly want something, but for some gods know what reason, it is the job of the game developers to find out what the players want for them. Jake, I actually believe you guys are the babies here. Man-children at the very least.
The regional stories just aren't that interesting. Like the Goron region, like where they're all like obsessed with rocks because they're possessed or cursed or whatever, but it doesn't amount to anything really, you know? And I think part of it too, Jake, is like I didn't feel, you know, I had issues with the story in Breath of the Wild too, but I think what it did have was better told, where at least it felt like each region felt like it was building up to something, you know? Like they had the divine beasts, and those are directly targeting the castle, you know, and that weakens Ganondorf. And I thought that was kind of cool. And they also acted as like a constant reminder of your goal. You know, I think Pear from IGN on Twitter was the one who may have brought this up, or someone else did, about how like the laser beams are always focused on Hyrule Castle. They're always reminding you, always pointing you toward your goal. And so you know, it's a subtle thing and maybe a subliminal thing, but I think it did help. It's like, it's always a persistent reminder of what the end game is. And Tears of the Kingdom doesn't have that. Like nothing really, again, seems tied together. You know, you go to each region, you get the spirit form of these champions, which is also weird, you know?
Yeah, awful. I think I saw that tweet too. I think it was Brian Altana, so shout out.
Oh, that was Brian. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, from IGN.
But yeah, it's funny. It's like it's making it so clear to me that I think in Breath of the Wild there was this beautiful marriage of you are a survivor, and what you are doing in the game is surviving. And when you walk into a town, the thing that everybody's reacting to is that you survived. You are here, and you are going to change something here. And there's something, that narrative thrust, I think is actually powerful, and I felt embodied in that game. Whereas in this game, when you walk into a town, it's like, I didn't know what these people were going to say. Like, my best buddy, hey, there's a big storm.
Yeah, good point. Like, I had no reason to care what the NPCs were going to say, because I didn't even myself... I wasn't invested in the story, so why do I care what these randos have to say to me, you know?
Yeah, and the contrivance of something uninteresting is going wrong in our town. It's essentially the same thing over and over again with like a palette swap. Half the time it's the weather, half the time it's something that's basically the weather. And I just like, to be totally honest, I kind of hate calling stuff out like this sometimes, but it feels like bad writing. It feels like you couldn't come up with anything more interesting. I like write little scenarios in my head all the time where I'm like, you could have used any of these towns as a way to tell us something about Ganondorf that was cool. Like, you know, yeah, please.
Yeah, I mean, so to your point, I mean, Nintendo famously, for better or worse, I think depends on the game, they operate on the gameplay first mantra, and by and large, I'm happy with that, you know? But then you have instances like this, where it feels like there should be more of a cohesive narrative, and it completely drops the ball, especially when they've had 6 years to work on it and address the issues that were first raised in the first game, and they don't. But then, Jake, you also have examples where they've done, as you've said, with Zelda itself, like, they've had good stories. Majora's Mask had amazing characters that tied into the overall narrative and made you want to help them out, and you felt invested for their fate along with the overall fate of the world, and they have not, you know, they were not able to accomplish that in Breath of the Wild, and even more so with Tears of the Kingdom, where everything just feels so separated. And I think that kind of speaks to, actually, I don't know, do you have more to say about the story for now? Or? Well,
yeah, I just think what you're highlighting for me is that so like Ganondorf and what is going wrong in each of these regions feel, the connection between them is frail at best. Yes, and it almost, to me, playing the game, it actually felt like Ganondorf disturbed the world, and then it was just kind of like the ripple effect. It was like, oh, so now these people have to deal with this thing, and it wasn't him actively making the world this way. And maybe that's actually what they were going for, but I just keep playing in my head like how cool it would have been if it felt like as you were helping out these parts of the world, you were defeating him in little
Right.
ways. You were
Like,
making
Breath of the
progress
Wild
against
did
it.
that.
Yeah, exactly. And I just or even just use it as a way to tell us something about Ganondorf. I think about this all the time. The Gorons that were eating the stupid rocks that made them dummies. I have this cutscene in my head. You could have done this with any of the regions of like Ganondorf, all hot, showing up in one of these regions, taking one of the leaders, taking Yunobo, getting his ear, and have him with his weird little mouth, with his cool Matt Mercer voice actor, whisper something in the Goron's ear. And it's like magic. And he hears this, and it like gets in his head. And now all of a sudden, this Goron is doing things in the town that benefit Ganondorf. He is like actively producing things that are helping his overall mission. And then you stop that. Now you feel like I'm fighting Ganondorf and his whole thing this whole time. But instead, it's just like, oh, okay, you guys are dealing with a natural disaster. I have saved you. Now I'll go to the next one. And that's it.
Could somebody please explain to me how anyone could just outright forget what your final destination in Breath of the Wild is? And how is it a subtle thing that up to 4 massive mechas aiming their laser pointers towards Hyrule Castle is something meaningful, as opposed to the more unclear approach in Tears of the Kingdom? If you guys love Breath of the Wild so much, an open world game, why is it a bad thing to be uncertain where your end goal is? Why is it a bad thing not being sure whether the final destination is the now floating Hyrule Castle or the depths? We are not even halfway through their video, but I can't wait popping the question. Did you guys actually play the game? And regardless of whether you know Zelda is Ganondorf's puppet or not, Yunobo is being controlled by a strange mask the fake Zelda had him make and put on. Yet your suggestion for improvements is arguably an even cheaper form of mind control. Must I really point out the obvious, that by thwarting the fake Zelda's plan in Death Mountain, you're also hindering Ganondorf in achieving his goal?
You know, for there to be some actual impact to what you're doing, for that to actually influence the world. Like, one thing I hate, Jake, is the Blood Moon, because it just feels like it undoes everything I did. It's like, why did I do anything? It's all back, you know?
And in this game in particular, it felt like the video game mechanic was simply, I felt it more. I felt the need to reload. I was like, oh, it's happening. I've progressed too far.
Right.
The Blood Moon is happening. Yeah, it didn't feel like Ganondorf's presence. It didn't feel like a threat. It just felt like we gotta reload. Sorry, that guy you just beat, he's back. It wasn't hard. You can beat him again. Enjoy. You know. Yeah. Let's since we kind of got there, let's turn this corner by that final boss fight. I keep trying to convince myself I liked this more than I did, because I'm just trying not to be negative, but I guess I just didn't like it. And I think so much of it is like you press the power up button so many times in a row that I just can't buy in. And the use of dragons in this game I find to be wholly ineffective. I agree. I feel that this game is like a kid ran up and said, you know what's cool? Dragons. And that's as far as the idea went. And because it's so weird how, like, for some reason, the dragon is more powerful than Ganondorf, just because that's, I guess, the power structure of this world. So a dragon is a bigger threat than he was on the ground, though the ultimate threat continues to be us in human form. So so already I'm like a little bit confused there. But something I really liked about Breath of the Wild was when you found the memories, I thought there was kind of like a salient idea there of stepping into somebody else's memory and what that's like and what you get out of that and why you're doing it. And for the memories this time around to be like, oh, you get them by going to the pools of dragon tears.
Right.
No. Like, no, I reject that. It just is so meaningless. It's so like, oh, well, she, turned into a dragon and her tears carry her memories.
You are free to believe recovering lost memories from amnesia is more meaningful than finding the memories of another person. A person whom you swore to protect with your life. Doesn't mean your criticism makes any logical sense, though.
I don't know. It was underwhelming. Like, it was cool. It was cool, like, flying around. It was neat. But, Jake, it speaks to another issue I had from Breath of the Wild that I did not address here. It doesn't make use of the world. It doesn't, and as you touched on, it doesn't make use of really anything distinct about this game. All it's doing is using the airspace that already existed. Yep. And that's it, you know? And it looks cool visually, but that's it. It mechanically is not doing anything new or novel.
Every single thing in this game that's cool, every single one has the exact same level of cool removed from context. You look at it on its own, and that is exactly what it is. Nothing else in the game ever builds up to anything. There's no connective tissue. There's no building of a theme. There's no emotional buildup. Nothing. It is, you watch that scene, you know exactly what it is, and that's how you think turning into a dragon is cool. Great. That's all there is to it. That's what you, yeah.
It's so ironic, Jake, that the word you kept using, like, you know, that nothing's building up here, is so ironic for a game almost entirely based around building. They made this its main focus. Ultra Hand is the kind of key new mechanic here. And I think, should we move on for story for now?
Is that okay? I feel we're really hitting our stride right now.
Well, I think we are. So I have two like interlinked issues here, Jake. I touched on one earlier. This game has no idea whether it's a game or a sandbox. Like, it gives you all these tools, but the game doesn't really motivate you to use them all that often. I mean, you are using, aside from the shrines, I never really felt driven to make cool stuff.
I know! It is, yeah, it's just slowing you down to get you to a solution that I think is ultimately not that interesting. And whereas, like, in Breath of the Wild, earlier you brought up, like, seeing a tree off in the distance, maybe somebody comments on it, and it's like, oh man, I'm gonna go see what's going on with that tree. And I felt like playing that game, what was there was always kind of interesting, and maybe I accidentally found some interesting things on the way there. And this game does not care about the end result, and instead, like, you're gonna have so much fun getting there. And I can't really say, outside of the first several times you experiment with different parts, which cool. But the fact is that I feel like controlling all of the vehicles feels kind of the same. It's not that interesting. There's not, and
Could you please make your underwhelming argument about a fucking tree in the distance vaguer, please? Guess Jake doesn't care about the journey, only the destination.
I mean, I think now, in a lot of ways, us doing this video has been my quest for meaning in Tears of the Kingdom, and I'm trying to, and I think the more we talk about it, the more I'm realizing is that Breath of the Wild was a pizza, and Tears of the Kingdom, they just had years, they had unlimited time and unlimited money to put as many toppings as possible on the pizza. And now I'm bringing it over to somebody, and they're going, wow, this looks great.
You figure it out.
What is it?
Yeah,
a pizza?
Exactly.
And I go, it's a pizza. And they go, no, it's not. And I go, no, I swear, there's a pizza under there. And everybody's looking at me going, but Jake, why don't you like it? It's more. Right. And so that, I think that is becoming clear to me. And it's funny, looking at my list, there are still, I can't believe this, so many things that we have yet to talk about that I still found unimaginably dumb. And one I have to bring up, just because I need to get this off my chest. The summons. Really, the guys, your buddies.
Yeah.
The spirits. Yeah,
I hate them.
Whose idea was it to say, you know how we're going to activate this ability? You're going to go over to him, and you're going to talk to him. And you're going to press the A button, and that's how you're going to activate the ability. But also, the fact that there are these glowing green little spirit dudes that are hanging out with you, and you have to deal with this dumb animation of them like going back to your ring and then coming out every time you climb something or whatever. Would it have been so awful if it was just the actual character hanging with you the whole time? Would that have been so unreasonable?
The only reason Jake, I've questioned this myself as well.
Okay.
The only reason I can think for this is simply so they can justify the characters, like, you know, turning the apparitions and reappearing elsewhere, right? Like, that's their contextual reason, so they don't have to fake it with, you know, them just, you know, so it makes sense contextually. I don't think it matters. I agree. Like, having them as these, like, having them as just purely, like, these seemingly emotionless spirits made them feel... It was just weird. It was just weird having them with me. And then also, like, it did chip away, too, at a feeling I did enjoy from Breath of the Wild, which was that sense of isolation, you know? Like, I felt like I'm on this journey by myself, you know? And I've got to figure it out. But having, like, a constant companion, and yes, I know you can turn them off, but you don't want to because you basically do need their abilities oftentimes, especially the flying guys, the bird, whatever.
But the thing about that is that what's funny to me is that in Breath of the Wild, you gain abilities. They are your abilities.
Yep.
And in this game, they tell you that they're your abilities, but they're not.
Yeah,
and the weird thing is that they also tell you that the character is unlocking a new level of ability for themselves, but they're not.
Yeah. No.
None of it makes any sense. Yeah.
And then the interface, as you said, is bad. The interface for them is bad, and it gets worse the more of them you have. Because for one, I went to the Gerudo region first, and last, and she's the smallest character of all, which meant all the others are getting in my way constantly. I was activating their powers when they didn't want to, and that often had a detrimental effect. For instance, the bird guy, you know how many times I blew away freaking Zonite that I wanted?
Yep, me too.
Yeah, it's so annoying. Yeah, it's just bad. You have to chase them down because they're not always with you. Sometimes for arbitrary reasons, where in the hell did she go? Where is she? You know, especially because she's the only one, the Gerudo girl, who I think tries to take the terrain as much as possible. She seems to be less willing to just materialize elsewhere. I don't know. Maybe I'm making that up. But
using Jake's own logic, I can actually argue that the powers are not yours either in Breath of the Wild. Who appears when you use Rivali's Gale? Rivali. Who appears when you use Daruk's protection? Daruk. Who appears when Mipha's Grace gets activated? Mipha. Who appears when you use Urbosa's Fury?
Thunder! Oh yeah!
Regarding the implementation of activating the powers in Tears of the Kingdom, I am able to give it a pass because all of the buttons are mapped out to other actions. Aside from Rivali's Gale, the powers you get in Breath of the Wild are extremely powerful. Mipha functions as a fairy, only she fully revives your hearts, as well as granting you temporary extra ones. Daruk automatically protects Link, knocking enemies back in the process. Urbosa summons lightning storms, dealing massive damage in a wide area. As a result, these powers need time to charge up. How long? From 6 to 24 minutes. The case is the opposite for Tears of the Kingdom. You can now use any ability you want, with practically no waiting time, but as a result, they are far less powerful, even when upgraded. It also should be mentioned that since the Sage avatars actively fight enemies with you, you may be having your weapons break a lot slower than without them. Also opposite to Breath of the Wild, 3 of the 4 powers are now useful for exploration, instead of just 1. Tulin allows Link to glide much farther distances, Sidon's water shield helps Link traverse areas with burning temperatures, and Yunobo's rollout allows you to break rocks and ore without having to expend your weapons or bomb flowers. Whichever system you prefer is up to you. My main point is that Jake is saying something here which goes against his own talking points. Shocking, I know. Alright, I'm gonna have to wrap it up here, because further on in the video, I will just be repeating myself. Also towards the end here, Andre and Jake do bring up a few decent suggestions of how the game could be done better. Otherwise, it's just about the same as everything I've addressed up till this point, along with some other contradictory or questionable arguments. This video was basically my first exposure to GameXplain, but boy is it one huge stain on the channel which may otherwise be great. Audrey and Jake could very well have just slipped up big time here, which may be the opposite of their usual content. But if they actually have a track record of talking and behaving like absolute frauds and hacks, then I am happy to have further exposed them for what they are, I suppose. Now, you may have gotten the impression that I believe the story in Tears of the Kingdom is close to pure perfection, and that any criticisms directed towards the game's writing mean almost nothing. But that is not the case. I cannot say anything for certain in this regard, other than it does its job well enough within Tears of the Kingdom. I have seen arguments about the game trying too hard standing on its own, trying to distance itself from Breath of the Wild and the other games, despite the fact that you can discover so many clothes worn by the other Links, and that is unfortunate. It's kind of funny, because making game review videos is something that has always tickled my fancy, but I simply don't have the time for it. At the very least, not for all of them. Maybe this video also served to let you know my own stance on the game, even if just a little bit. As a small parting bonus, I guess, I want to talk about one thing Tears of the Kingdom could have done better. The final battle with the Demon Dragon is what some may consider a spectacle boss fight. It's by no means complex, nor is it anywhere near difficult, it is simply an epic, interactive, cinematic experience. But I think they could have taken it a step further in that regard. When you get to the last portion of the Demon Dragon's health, The Blood Moon appears. Why not have a cutscene activate right at that moment, showing Ganondorf's army spawn in abundance, exactly like the vision he showed Link and the sages? The monsters will then advance towards Pyro's camp, and maybe even some other areas in the game. The soldiers are barely keeping the monsters at bay, but time is not on their side. And before the battle resumes, you will see Pyro look towards the sky and say, "We can't take much more of this. Link, please hurry." So let me know, by either making drastic changes or minor changes, how would you improve Tears of the Kingdom? Thanks for watching, and please take care. Well, never mind then. Looks like Andre is yet another example of poorly handled critical gaming analysis videos reflecting upon their true scummy personality. Go figure. These people really think the world revolves around them, huh?